Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Spotlight on CS Ops. Matthew Lynn coming from a very chilly, by Austin standards, Austin, Texas. I mean, we were below freezing last week, so that qualifies as get out the mittens and the winter jacket. Uh, and Jean Naran up in the Northwest.
And I think I'm maybe even warmer temperatures than where you are, which is kind of crazy for Canada versus a Texas kind of thing. So,
More than
good to
you
see you,
would think.
Matthew.
Yeah. Well, we are thrilled, weather aside, to talk to Heather Hansen today. I have known Heather for years, and it's John, I think you have too,
Yes, yeah.
actually. So Heather's an OG, a long time senior Gainsight administrator, but the reality is when you administer Gainsight or have that in your title, you end up doing 62 other things that are sort of packed in there along the way. And she does that at Acquia, and we are thrilled to have you with us, Heather.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, Heather. Maybe just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Like, how did you get into doing Gainsight work?
Yeah, so sort of similar to most people, I started off with a customer service type background, and then moved into sort of an account management, client relations type of role. And then from there, started working on building out a customer success program. So I was actually a director of customer success for a while. Um, while I was working kind of in other areas, I kind of really delved into process and got really interested in building out process in systems, specifically Salesforce. So then when our company purchased Gainsight, it kind of was just a natural thing to start figuring out how to build out some of those processes in Gainsight as well. So my boss came to me and said, "Hey, you seem to be really good at this whole process thing, and then also now putting it into a system. So is that something that you would be interested in kind of pivoting over to?" And so I said, it'd be nice to do something different for a little bit since I'd been customer facing for pretty much most of my career. So I decided to take on that challenge and kind of move over there, and then have not looked back, honestly. Like, it kind of hits all the sweet spots for me with like problem solving and really leveraging some of that customer facing background to work internally with people the same way, and treat it kind of the same way. So it's kind of been something that's really kind of made my work life a lot more balanced and interesting and that whole thing. So
I just feel like this lift and shift when people come off the front lines of CS and then move over towards operations. And I feel like, and you should correct me if I've got this mistaken, because I actually have never held an official customer-facing CS role, but it's it's the same motions. And it's
Mhm.
even some of the same stakeholders. It's just that the stakeholders are wearing different hats. So the CSMs become the customers. You still have to deal with process. You're still dealing with apps. You're still in many cases developing what some would
Yep.
call a success plan, or at least a roadmap, a journey towards
Right.
success. Yeah, it seems like all the pieces are still there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also helpful because you have built out like a lot of the processes as being that frontline person. So you kind of have that expertise that you can leverage in those conversations. And, I haven't dropped off of any of my followings of like what's going on in the customer success world. And so I'm still able to have those conversations of, this is what this company's doing, and here I've seen it done this way, and I've seen it done this way, and here's how maybe we could pivot and do it this way. So there's a lot of that consultation piece, like you said, that you actually do with customers as well, except now leveraged with those internal people. So yeah, I would agree with that.
And it's almost as if, like, I always think of it as almost like you're bilingual in a way, like you're able to talk CS and you're able to talk systems as well.
Yeah.
How do you
I use
manage like that, or how do you swivel between those two things? Like, is your day split between, a certain amount of time spent with CS and talking shop with them, or like how do you manage that world and being
Yeah,
bilingual?
I like to say a lot of times that it's like you're the translator because, obviously operating in Gainsight, ours at least feeds into Salesforce. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen with the Salesforce team as well. So there's a lot of translating the process from the people who do its mouth into like the systems position and how like you're the translator in, okay, this is what they're saying. So this is what you need to build. So that sort of thing. It really, to answer your question, it really depends on the day. A lot of Tuesday and Wednesday seems to be taken up with a lot of meetings, and most of those meetings are going to be with those internal stakeholders that I deal with. Every once in a while, I'll get pulled into those kind of, software type conversations. But mostly it's a pretty good balance of trying to do the work and then meet with people about it. And, same as everyone, I kind of begrudgingly go, well, how am I supposed to do the work if I'm always meeting about doing the work? And so it's a lot of trying to find time to like be like, hey, I'm going to block these 2 hours off on my calendar so I can actually work on some of the things that we've been meeting about for the last 2 weeks. So,
Yeah, I love that when, someone takes the last 30 minutes off of your day and just
mhm.
assumes, well, she must be free.
Yep.
She's free at 6:30 p.m. I'm like, no.
No,
That's when she was
no.
probably going to do the work that she had been, bought on for all day long.
Exactly. Yep. Sometimes that feeds into lunch or, I have children, so they demand my attention usually once they get home. So it's a lot of, yeah, trying to cram as much as I can into the workday and then occasionally having it trail into night, but trying to keep that work-life balance is important to me. Yeah.
I know that about you, that yeah, work-life balance is definitely a big passion of yours. And so I was just going to quickly ask, like, is there any tips or tricks like to newcomers or even new parents maybe out there that are trying to juggle their world and their work world and their family world, and to kind of be in this space where there's so many competing requests and or competing needs on your time at least?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it, I've always been a doer, and so I've always been the kind of person that my first instinct is always to say yes and then kind of figure out how to do it. And I think as I had children and kind of have gotten older, I think I've learned a lot more to say no or to say, like, hey, I have this many things on my plate right now. So which one of those is going to come off so that I can work on this? And so there's a lot of having those give and take conversations with my stakeholders or my boss or whoever so that they understand, like, hey, when it hits this time, like most of the time, like I gotta go. Like if you need me to do something afterwards, that's fine, but then understand that that means it's going to give over here at another time where I'm going to knock off an hour early because my kids lost an hour from me, so there's a lot of trying to have those negotiations, right? Whether it's work related or time related, of like, hey, I can't do everything. So which one's the most important to you? And then let me tell you which one's the most important to me.
I love that. And I really like the way Heather, it just in your description, but just in knowing you in general, you're very upfront, in my opinion, about this in a great way. Not like you're not standoffish, but you're like, okay, I can give you this, but I can't give you this and that. And so would you like this or that? And that I think by being clear and by having great, in this case, boundaries, but maybe you might use the word guidelines or something if you wanted to sort of sell it a little more. You're actually freeing your stakeholders to make great choices instead of them assuming, yep, I'm taking it all on, and then suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly later, there's a crisis because there was a misunderstanding.
Yeah. There's a lot of also, I think, trust that gets built, right? So obviously when I first started, I wasn't quite so comfortable with saying like, hey, I don't know if I can do all these things. A lot of it has been over time and working with these people to like build the credibility and build the dependability and all of that stuff so that they know, like, if I say I'm going to do something, it's going to get done, and it's probably going to get done before I say it's going to get done. So like a lot of times I, you know, purposefully give myself a buffer just in case something comes up, either kid related or other, importance related, so that I have that buffer to under promise and over deliver. As Matthew was pointing out with the weather, last week I got completely derailed because Atlanta shuts down when there's even a tiny bit of snow. So a lot of my work last week had to be kind of rearranged because my kids were home and I had to kind of manage both of those. And luckily I've built enough rapport with my stakeholders to be able to say, hey, I got kids today. I'll get to this as fast as I can. It just might take me a little longer. And they're perfectly okay with that because I have that credibility built up and they know that they can rely on me to get it done, even if it might take a little longer than they were expecting.
I like that. That's I think it's like it shows like your character and it also shows your level of professionalism because I think it's important to know that life is okay, right? Like these people that you work with have similar issues. And like,
Mhm.
last week my son brought a virus home, so we got hit pretty hard and things had to change up. But it's just that's what most people experience, especially others with kids, and that's just life. And so to be transparent about that, I think is it just shows your character and also shows like your level of professionalism. So I really like that.
Thanks.
The any tips and tricks around like how you organize your work? Do you guys like do you manage your stuff as like projects or programs, or when you're working through initiatives, is it like a lot of ad hoc stuff, or how do you kind of drive the work that you're working on and prioritizing some of
Yeah.
those activities?
Yeah, so I work out of a Jira like a lot of people. I tend to work in sprints, so I do kind of two-weekish sprints. It's a lot of juggling and kind of bouncing between different things. So at one point it might be like, hey, I need this report, and then another time it might be, hey, I want to launch this new program. And so a lot of it is kind of planning out with your stakeholders, like what is kind of important at that moment in time. Similar to a lot of people, I have a lot of stakeholders who all have kind of different responsibilities. So we have our account management team and our customer success team and our TAMs all in Gainsight. And so trying to be able to manage across those three different groups that need very different things can be a challenge. And so it's a lot of kind of give and take with like, hey, I'm working on this urgent like program for this leader right now, but I can work your report in on at this point. And really just like upfront, like Matthew pointed out, having those conversations about like where I'm spending my time currently so that they know like, hey, I get this is important to you. This is what's happening with me. I'm going to slot this in as soon as I can. And this is when I can get it to you by. And obviously that can change just based on, oh my goodness, we have this fire. We really got to get this done right now. That can obviously shift things, but I try not to let that kind of throw off everything. So it's a lot of for me like planning out, okay, today I have my to-do list and this is what I'm going to hit first and then I'm going to hit this, and that can get thrown off with meetings or that can get thrown off with Slacks where, somebody's messaging me like we have a problem right now where people's calendars aren't working correctly with Groove, which is then impacting what's happening in Gainsight. So there's a lot of, hey, can you help me troubleshoot this? And, that can throw everything off. But ultimately, it's really setting those realistic deadlines for myself as well as with the stakeholder and really kind of thinking through how long is it going to take to actually accomplish this so I know how much time I need to bucket in my day to get it done.
Ask you another question, and it comes back to your CS life where you were in the customer success team proper. I had a conversation over Slack with someone just this morning, and they said, I'm the only person in this operations function who's got any sort of CS knowledge whatsoever. Everyone else, like data analyst or process engineer or whatever. And so I'm having trouble maybe exerting my influence or exerting my expertise because they're asking for things that maybe aren't the smartest from a CS perspective. They make perfect sense from a systems perspective, but from a CS perspective, maybe not so much. So how do you navigate those sorts of things where you get a request, or maybe it's an email campaign, you're like, I don't think that's a great audience for this message or whatever. Like, how do you sort of exert your influence and your expertise given you've got a lot of it?
Yeah, it can be tough. I think, I mean, to be honest, it goes back again to kind of building that rapport and building that credibility and really like being like, this is going to sound funny, but I sometimes like to say I have an I told you so list where like I'll do the like initial like pushback on like, hey, I don't think this is a great idea. And like, here's why I don't think it's a great idea. And they might come back to me and go, yeah, we hear you, but we're going to do it this way. And then I'm like, okay. And then in my head, I'm like, that's going on my I told you so list when it comes back to like bite us at a later date. Right. And some of it is literally, like you said, I'm a very direct person. So it will often be like, it'll blow up and I'll go, hey, yeah, remember when I told you that like we shouldn't have do it this way because this and this and this was going to happen? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, you did say that, didn't you? And you're like, yeah, I did. So like sometimes it's like you just kind of have to do it and let it happen and then come back and say, hey, remember when I pointed out that these and these, this and this was going to happen? Well, here we are. So now let's work together to figure out how we're going to fix it and then plan on how we're going to address things like this moving forward. So it's a lot of, I think, being candid and then sometimes letting it blow up, right?
I want that button. We always talk about, like, I think in the nomenclature, like, oh, I have an easy button, and now I want an I told you so button. And when I press it,
Right?
here's the first thing that would happen. The Price is Right losing horn would sound.
Mhm.
You know, that's bum, 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 boom. And then I would explain or recant what I had said or restate what I had said.
Yeah, and I think that's also a lot of where like sandboxes come in handy, right? Because they can say like, I want you to build it this way, and you can say, okay, let me build it, and I'm going to show you, and I'll show you like how it's going to operate, and then like you can see kind of what I'm talking about. And then I personally always try to bring it back to the end person that's going to be doing the process and be like, hey, I get that you think this is the easiest way, but let's talk about your CSM, like, or your AM or your TAM. Like, what is this process going to look like for them? Because if we're making it more complicated for them, then it's going to be harder to even get to the outcome that you're looking for. So it's a lot of like, let's think about how this would fit into the way they currently work. And if we need to change that, then great, but we should probably try to find a way to fit it into their current workflow rather than building it all over here in some other place that they have to then leave and go over here and do it because they're going to be either A, less likely to do it, or B, they're not going to do it well. So let's, I try to always drive it back to that. Who's going to be doing it? What's the easiest way for them to do it? Right. And then I can kind of build it accordingly.
I like those tactics, like just the ability to just like let's walk through this a little bit more and kind of go to the full A to Z or A to Z of all the different activities, like what will happen next, what who's going to take it from here, all that. Because I find that sometimes is quite can be quite enlightening as well, just for people to realize, oh, right, I didn't think about that piece. And so, yeah, maybe you're right or whatever. And so you can kind of avoid some work. And then I also like your other tactic of like, well, let's build it in a sandbox first. Let's not go to production with this. Let's at least try it out somewhere, see how it goes. And then if it works out, then we can migrate it over or whatnot. So I think those are super, super great tactics. And I assume like, because yeah, looking at your LinkedIn, like, I mean, you've been doing this for a better part of a decade. So there's definitely some like, this ain't your first rodeo type thing, right? And I suspect like, and I know like Matthew and I have been in this field for a decade, two or more. So like it's maybe it's true of all of us here, but like there's got to be a certain level of like almost not quite rinse and repeatability, but like, when we build NPS programs, when we build playbooks, when we build email campaigns, like it's kind of like the same thing. We're finessing, we're optimizing, we're making them better, but like there's like you must, I don't know if you see it this way, but you must be building on the same like, it's kind of like I don't know, a Japanese blacksmith or whatever that's just finessing the heck out of their skill set, that you're just over time becoming this like uber professional in either building playbooks or whatever thing it may be.
Yeah, and even if it's not that, it's also becoming the expert in like figuring out like the steps that you need to take to kind of figure out how to do it, right? So there's a lot of like, hey, I have this challenge. I haven't really seen anything like it before, but I have kind of mastered like how I'm going to go about figuring out the answer to that, or how I'm going to figure out how I'm going to plug it all together in the system. So it's at the very least having that framework of how I'm going to get to where I need to go, not even necessarily like replicating something exactly, right? It's more that thought process of like, okay, I know how I'm going to engineer this because I've already experienced all this stuff before, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's like Jedi CSOP skills. Like you know the Force, so you know how to apply it in whatever way
Right.
needed.
Right. Exactly.
I love
Is it
it.
Jedi or Vulcan or,
Yeah, pick
which
your
Oh,
analogy do you
yeah.
use?
superhero analogy.
Which you prefer, Heather?
Yeah, probably my children would and my husband would probably say Jedi, so we'll go with that. On the community, I'm Wonder Woman, so maybe we call it our my Wonder Woman ability. I don't know.
I
That's
would
right.
agree with that for sure.
That's right. I love that. Speaking of community,
Mhm.
I see you interacting with a lot of folks at least in the global Gainsight admin Slack community. I just actually want to thank you on behalf of myself and a whole bunch of admins because you always have such wise advice. And sometimes I'll pose a question or I'll see a question go by, and I just feel like, oh, who's probably has experience with that? Heather Hansen. She's probably lived that at some point in her decade or more of experience and has got not just a solution, but about three thoughts on other things that are in the orbit of the solution to watch out for or whatever. So talk about the community. Talk about, how you've, interacted there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably one of the things I definitely find most rewarding about the position that I've been in is that the ability to like mentor and help people kind of brainstorm like ways around things. And that is definitely one of the best things about the CS ops community in general is just everybody is so willing to like I don't hesitate to be like, hey Matthew, can we get on a call and let me walk you through what I'm running into and can you help me brainstorm like how to do this? And same with a lot of other people. It's something that makes you feel good about yourself and then in turn makes you feel good about contributing to the larger community and kind of being that person that has helped somebody work through whatever problem that they're having because you've seen it before or just like hey let's come up with some great ideas together that then we can then take back to whoever to give them, some ideas about how they might do things differently. So it's part of the job that I find very rewarding also in addition to the being challenged. And so it's nice to have that component. And I think it also kind of scratches my like old manager itch where I used to actually have a lot of direct reports and I used to, have a lot of opportunities to do mentorship for people who reported directly to me. So that community interaction feeds some of that in me that I don't necessarily have today that I definitely miss sometimes. So it's nice to be able to kind of scratch that like I want to manage somebody itch with not actually managing somebody, if that
Right.
makes
Don't have all the burden that comes with managing
sense.
people, HR and
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. So it's nice to have that type of interaction without kind of the responsibility, I guess I would say.
I love it. You're definitely a big proponent of our community, and you've helped so many people. And so I love it that, like, yeah, I see it the same way. Like, it's fulfilling and it's also helpful, hopefully, as much as possible. But I see it as like I feel that it's so incredibly fulfilling to like hone your skills, to get tested a little bit, to see what other people have done, so you can learn a few things along the way as well. So, super appreciative of all the help and all the mentorship that you've provided to the various folks in the community. I'm sure if we did a roll call of how many people got help from Heather along the way, I suspect that it'd be a long laundry list of folks. So
Well, thank
it's super cool.
yeah, thank you.
The as just talking about like some of the things, like, is there anything that you, when you look back at your career like in the last decade or so, like, is there any cool like initiatives or cool things that um uh or things that you do, like projects or programs that you do that you particularly love or you just find like so fascinating?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to a lot of people, I have some challenges getting some people to do things in Gainsight and follow processes appropriately. So, but the thing still needs to happen, right? So we have the CSQL process where we leverage CTAs to like fire that basically get created by the CSM and assigned to the AM to kind of follow up on. And then based on that, the AM is then supposed to come and attach the appropriate opportunity to that CSQL so that we know kind of what happens to it. They're not so great at doing that. So we've had to kind of find some workarounds for how we can get that information without having to constantly like chase them down. So we leverage a lot of dashboards and a lot of pushing emails out with like, hey, you need to go do this. But we also created a survey that literally they can just click in line in their email to say whether or not they have had a discovery call, or if they're going to open an opportunity, or if they already have, or if they're not going to do anything, or they don't need to do anything. And literally they can click a button in the email, and then that then kicks off this process to kind of do all of that for them. So it's really taken like it out of their hands to a degree where they're not quite as responsible for having to go update it. They literally can just click a button and then Gainsight does it all for them. So that is probably one of the things that's really helped the most in being able to report back to the business on what impact the CSM team is having by driving, those CSQLs. So I think that's probably one of the things that's I would say probably more innovative, and then also trying to get around like people having to go into Gainsight who don't like to do that because they're working somewhere else, right?
I
Yep.
think that's super innovative. Like I'm sure everyone in the world struggles with getting CSMs to update the records. So I don't think that's unique to anyone. So that's a super cool solution that you guys came up with.
Yeah, it's worked pretty well. I do push back a lot because, they'll come to me and be like, well, hey, what about if we do this? And I'm like, okay, but let's time out and think about this. Like, are we really just like making excuses for them to not go do what we want them to do? Because if that's the case, we really probably need to think about a different way to accomplish it versus trying to build all this complicated stuff to like accomplish what it would be much simpler for a person to do. So full transparency, I don't always do it. I often will push back and say, hey, maybe we should stop making excuses for them, and obviously in a nice way, but like maybe we should stop making excuses for them and like work on holding them accountable for, doing what we expect them to do.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we gave you a chance to look back, like what are some of the things from your past that, have worked out. As we wind down our conversation today, give us a look at the future. Make a prediction, if you will, about CS or CS ops or your career. I'll give you any direction you want to go on that. Make a prediction for us.
Yeah, I mean, the new hot thing is AI. So I think always trying to figure out ways to further kind of hone in on like a customer's health without like someone having to physically go and look at something. So for me, like, you know, really trying to figure out a way to get that AI to work proactively for us so that we don't have to rely on a CSM to go to a leader and tell them something's happening, or the system can flag somebody as it needs to. So it's a lot of for us trying to figure out how we're going to leverage that AI to do some of the work that maybe is a little more time consuming from a CSM or account manager perspective. So it'll be interesting to see, I guess, how we leverage some of that stuff. And as, systems develop more and more AI, how that's all going to plug into our processes and kind of, get all of that working as efficiently as possible. So, it's again the best part about CS ops, right? Is like you're always learning. Like there's always something new to learn. And so, AI is no different from that. Like it's something that, you gotta constantly be studying and constantly be learning like the trends and what's coming up and all that stuff. And AI is the new learning, right?
For
I think
sure.
it's
I feel like AI, you should put AI on this CSQL matching issue. Like, can I match a CSQL to an opportunity using
oh, that
AI?
would be cool.
Like,
Yeah.
Right?
wins all around, right?
Mhm.
Could bottle that and sell it.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I think the more trying to delve more into the AI and how it can cause things to happen that do whatever we want it to do, whether it's flag a risk or like you pointed out, flag an opportunity, like how can we leverage some of the AI to do some of those things and more just have somebody verify that it's correct versus having to like identify it themselves, I think.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, that innovation I think makes what makes the career so exciting.
Mhm.
It's never a dull moment. There's always some new advancements or changes, and we're always trying to help our customers be more successful. So that's an awesome final statement or final position to kind of leave us with. So thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today. As Matthew mentioned, like you're a great advocate in the community. You're a huge stakeholder or huge person that gives back in the community. So really appreciated to have you here and appreciative of you being in our community and helping so many people.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I've had a great time with you as always. So it was nice to have a little bit of time to talk with you both.
Thanks, Heather. Great to talk to you. And I echo everything John just said. We appreciate that you're part of this community and part of this podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate it.